So we had to talk about rays in order to talk about angles. And similar with rays, there's not going to be a whole lot new here. It's more of refreshing your memory and giving some explanation to things you've been taught before. So the formal definition of an angle is it is a shape that's formed by two rays sharing an endpoint. So here I have ray OC and I have ray OW. So in my example here, the two rays would be ray OC, endpoint first, symbol points to the right, and ray OW, again, endpoint first. So those are my two rays. The endpoint they're sharing would be O. And this entire shape is the angle. And that can be a little tough to understand because we're not used to thinking of angles as not just the endpoints that the two rays share, but it includes the two rays. It's all together, this shape is the angle. When I want to name an angle, this can be really, really confusing because there are a lot of different ways of naming an angle. Fortunately, there's only one symbol. It's a picture of a little angle, and we will put it in front of the name. So the most common way of naming an angle is by using 3 points. So I put the symbol of an angle, and then I put the 3 points. When I use 3 points to name an angle, the middle has to be the shared endpoint. The other 2 points, it doesn't matter which order I put them in. So I could have also called this angle WOC. Sometimes we can name an angle with just 1 point, the shared endpoint. So I could have called this angle W. I have to be careful with this one. I would not recommend doing this one often, at least initially, until you get a little more comfortable with geometry. You will later this year be perfectly comfortable at that point, but right now, this can cause confusion. We can only do this. So I can use the shared endpoint only if there is only one possible angle that I'm talking about. To kind of illustrate what I mean with this, because that's confusing, is here. If I had this picture, if I say angle A, which angle A do I mean? Do I mean this angle A? Do I mean this angle A? Do I mean this angle A? Or do I mean this angle A? So this is a picture where there's more than one possible angle where the shared endpoint is A. So I would not be able to name it with just one letter, the shared endpoint. That's what I mean by I can use just the shared endpoint if, like in this angle here, there's only one angle that I'm actually talking about. There's yet again a fourth option. A fourth option is you will sometimes see textbooks especially label with a number. So like 1. In which case I put the angle and then the number it's labeled with. When we do this, this is not the angle measure. So when we talk about angle measure, that's a number like 30 degrees or 90 degrees. That's an angle measure. The number here is just a number saying, I want to talk about angle 1. In my picture up here, this is an example of where we would probably see these numbered to allow us to talk about angle 1 or angle 2 or angle 3 or angle 4 without having to use 3 points to name them. Textbooks like it because it's cheaper to print textbooks when you use numbers rather than 3 points, because they don't have to use as much ink and they don't take up as much space. Since I mentioned angle measures, so angle measure is a number that shows the size of the angle. It's like when we talk about the length of a segment. So the angle is a shape. So that's key here. The angle is a shape. The angle measure is a number. So when I want to talk about angle measure, if I'm talking about angle 4 in that picture there, angle 4 is a shape. If I want to talk about how big it is, I would put a little m for measure in front of angle 4, and this is now a number. Much like when we talked about segments versus segment length and how the symbols matter, it's the same thing with angles. I'm really picky with it because there's a big difference between a shape and an angle. Okay, it's going to take getting used to. You will make mistakes with this. We, as a class, will have to practice this. The distinction between a shape and a number. It is not natural for us to easily pick that up, and I'm aware of that. We'll get there. That's a long-term goal for us. I know my video is getting a little long, but the rest of this goes faster. So I've been talking about rays and shared endpoints. We actually have names for those. A side of an angle is one of the rays that make up an angle. So in the example I had up here, ray OC would be a side of that angle, and ray OW would be the other side of the angle. And the common endpoint, that shared endpoint, we call a vertex. So in that example, point O would be the vertex of that angle. So when we have that up here, going back to naming the angles, the vertex is always in the middle when I use 3 points. If there's only one possible angle to talk about, I name it with the vertex. So here, if I want to name the vertex of angle 4, so here's angle 4, U would be the vertex. If I want to name the sides of angle 3, here's angle 3. Well, the sides would be ray XW, because remember I have to start with the endpoint of the ray, and ray XU. If I want another name for angle 2, here's angle 2. I cannot use just the vertex because I have 4 different angles that have a vertex of y. So I'm going to have to name it with 3 points. So I can name this angle XYU or angle UYX. The important part is y is in the middle of those. And then what is another name for angle, for angle UXY? So here's UXY. I cannot use just the vertex because there's 4 different angles here that could be called angle X. So I have to use, and I could use the same 3 letters and say angle YXU. Or, because they put a number in there, I could call it angle 1. And then the last part of this video, I apologize for this video being so long, is just reviewing acute, right, obtuse, and straight angles. You have done this before. I don't feel I have to say a whole lot other than just reminding you acute angles, the measures between 0 and 90 degrees. Right angles have a measure of exactly 90 degrees. Obtuse angles have measures between 90 and 180 degrees. The one thing that might be new for you is a straight angle. It's an angle with a measure of 180 degrees. It is called a straight angle because it's a straight line. If you happen to forget the straight angle, it's not going to hurt anything. Acute, right, and obtuse are the three that you need to know.